Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Liana. Today I'm going to be doing a get ready with me, and I'm also going to be talking about my experience in the local theater community, which probably doesn't sound that interesting, but it was for me, and maybe you'll find some of it interesting as well as I start talking about it. And if maybe you don't find it all that fascinating, you could always mute it and just watch me put on makeup. Or maybe you could just speed up my voice so I sound like a little chipmunk. You know, whatever floats your boat. So if I forget to say what I'm putting on my face at any given moment, I'm probably not going to go through all the products, so just look in the description box down below. I always list everything there, and everything is usually cruelty-free unless I'm using something that's kind of old that's still kicking around in my collection. I may or may not have to put a warning in front of this video depending on how detailed I have to get about certain things. So just be mindful. There were some things that were kind of disturbing. So anyway, first things first, I started acting when I was in public school and I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was always really good at memorizing, and I always felt really comfortable on stage. So whenever they had like little school plays, I would ask if they had a role for me. I would audition, and you know, I would take little parts here and there. So I definitely was into that thing from a very young age. But high school, yeah, high school is where it got a lot more serious for me. I did take drama courses as part of my curriculum. Those are, of course, electives. They aren't something that you absolutely have to take. It's entirely up to you. So one thing about that was really great is that the instructor had been a working actor and writer in Toronto. And Toronto is obviously a really big city. A lot of people work in Toronto. That's where a lot of people in Canada go if they want to start their acting career, directing, whatever. There's a lot of schools there. And there's just a lot more opportunity in Toronto versus where I live. So it was really good to have somebody who actually had that kind of experience. She wasn't just a teacher. She actually knew what she was talking about. She had working experience. So that was really great. And the type of stuff that we learned a lot of different things. We learned improv, we learned mime, we learned behind the scenes stuff. So we learned all the sound design and stuff, different machines. We learned how to work a camera. And you know, we did scenes in front of the camera, actual acting on camera. Did I say tableau? We did tableaus. We did all kinds of different things, pretty advanced stuff. But it was all really fun, and she knew how to give really good feedback because she was experienced in it. So some of it was group work and some of it was just us. Sometimes we had to write our own scenes. Sometimes the scenes were already written. Sometimes they were from, you know, pretty famous plays. I remember there was one really fun thing where we did The Odd Couple, but it was sort of a gender reversal, so the roles were played by females. I got to play Oscar, which was pretty fun. So yeah, she taught us a lot, and one thing that was really great of her is that towards the end of the year, she took each of us she sat down with each of us one-on-one and kind of asked us what we felt we had to work on, if we could see this as a possible career for ourselves, or if this was just for fun. And when she sat down with me and she was asking me, you know, or is this just a hobby for you? Do you want to do this seriously? And I said, I really enjoy acting. I think I would like to do more of it outside of school. And she said, I can see you doing that. I think that you should go on auditions. So she was the first person to actually encourage me to further my acting career and actually take it a bit more seriously. She gave me resources. She told me websites I should go on to. She told me like where I should be looking. I think I've said this before in another video. I didn't finish high school at high school. I finished on my own. So when it came time for me to start auditioning, I don't think I did that until after I had actually finished my studies, or did I start? I think I might have started auditioning when I was maybe 17, or was I 18? I was 17 or 18 when I started auditioning for things. The thing about auditioning is that you're not going to get every single job. Definitely not. I was very much unprepared for the fact that a lot of the people I was auditioning with had so much more experience than I did. I remember I think it was the very first audition I went to, which was a little bit outside of this city. And one of the girls who was auditioning for the same role as me, she had headshots. She had a resume. It was very clear that she had been in the game for a long time, and she was several years younger than me. So, you know, that was kind of a wake-up call. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, like the only experience I have is from school. I don't have a resume. I don't have headshots. And, you know, that wasn't really going to happen. The only way I could build up a resume was to keep going on auditions until I got a role. And I did. I kept going on auditions. And a lot of the directors were very helpful in that they would actually give me feedback, which is not commonplace. It's not commonplace to actually have a director tell you what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Oftentimes you won't get a part and they don't actually tell you why. So my experience wasn't a common one. It wasn't something that you should be expected to go through if you are looking to get into theater. A lot of directors aren't going to come up to you and say, that was good, what I would suggest is this. A lot of directors aren't going to do that. I was very lucky in that respect. I auditioned for the same director at least twice. He was very helpful in telling me that I seemed a little bit insecure, which I was because, as I said, I was young and I was auditioning next to people who had obviously a lot more experience than I did. So I had to learn to gain a little bit more confidence in myself, for sure, which I think I succeeded in because when I was 19, I got my first job. But, you know, I had only been on 6 maybe auditions by that point, so that's great to have less than 10 auditions under your belt and to have landed something. Again, that's not common. Usually you would be going through a lot more before you get your first gig. So again, I feel very lucky in that respect. So yes, I was 19 and okay, can I just say for a second, I hate this Colourpop concealer with a passion. I'm going to be having a concealer roundup, and this one is not my favorite. Anyway, I was on an audition for a murder mystery dinner theater group. I'm not going to name any of the groups I was involved with just because they are very easily Googleable, especially with my name attached to them. So it would be very easy for you to look that up and find out roughly where I live. So that's something I have to be very mindful of in this situation. So it was a murder mystery dinner theater group, and there were, I don't know, I'd say there were probably about 10 of us at the audition, not including the group leader who held the audition. And the audition process kind of went like this. We were all in a library, at a room at a library. Obviously, she took a little bit of information about us. Some of it was written, some of it we said out loud. And she gave us a scenario. Somebody had died, you know, and one of us had been the killer, and she had written it down on a little piece of paper, and the person who was the killer knew who they were, but nobody else in the room did. And also on other pieces of paper, she had written down what type of personality we had. And so we had to sort of start throwing accusations at each other and acting really suspicious, in the sort of manner that we thought would befit the character we had. And it just kind of went on like that for a few minutes until it was revealed who the killer was. She also gave us an improv exercise. She gave us 3 words that we were supposed to just kind of off the top of our heads come up with a really quick story that had to involve all 3 words. Because when you're working in dinner theater, anything can happen, and she had to make sure that we could work quickly on our feet. But she accepted all of us into the group. I don't think all of us stuck around because most of those people I never saw again, except for maybe 2 of the other women. One of whom is a very prominent figure in our theater community. She's very talented, and she was very nice. I really enjoyed working with her. So that's vaguely how the audition process went. So I was 19. I was still kind of chubby at that point. Like at my heaviest, I was about 200 pounds. I'm between 5'3" and 5'4", just to give you a reference. So, you know, at that point, I was still kind of self-conscious about the way I looked, and it was hard for me too because that involves getting into a lot of different costumes. Not all of them fit me properly. So that was hard at that point to try and adjust, but I was starting to lose weight. I just want to give you a little point of reference for what kind of person I was at that point. But physically, in terms of my health, I was at a pretty good point in my life. I wasn't in too much pain, and I was obviously able to go to rehearsals for several hours at a time. No issue really, except for maybe a little bit of pain and fatigue, but nothing major. So my very first show was actually a New Year's Eve show that year, and that's a pretty big show to throw a newbie into because there were about 400 or 500 people. That's a huge show, and I was one of the leads. So you're supposed to stay in character all night, If somebody starts asking you questions, you have to respond in character. I did not do that night because I was very nervous, and the people at my table were so nice that I was just like kicking back and like hanging out with them. It was a Portuguese club, so some people spoke English really well, some people spoke partial English, and some people didn't speak English at all. And it was a medieval theme. So we were all kind of in corsets and stuff. I had a long blonde wig. And that was my first show. It was very big. It was very loud. I was paid $50 for that night. I was probably there for 3 to 4 hours. The show is not consistent. It's kind of broken up into different acts. Sometimes you're eating at your table and just having conversation with your table mates, and then it'll start back up again. And depending on the show, you will need audience participation. That one I don't think required audience participation. I think it was just us. But we did have a lot of trouble that night getting their attention. I mean, like I said, some of them didn't even speak English, so I really don't think they cared that we were there. After that, I didn't get another show for a while because they have off seasons and on seasons. And their on season is more like now through February. And every year, the person who runs the group has a barbecue around September. So that was the next time I saw the group. It was in September of the following year. By that time, I had lost a lot of weight. I was taking college courses online. And at that barbecue that she held, I met a lot of new people that I didn't recognize. There had been a lot of cast changes, so to speak. And I started getting hired for shows again. I don't know how many scripts total that she had written, but they kind of cycle through them, and it's up to the person paying for the show what script option that they want. So one of the next scripts that I was involved in was themed around fashion, and I was playing kind of like a nerd. And that was another pretty big show. I also played the murderer a few times, as well as sort of like a gravekeeper who wasn't really the murderer, but was not really a good guy, so... All of the rehearsals took place at the group owner's house, which is almost an hour away from where I live. And the rehearsals could last up to 3 hours at a time. They were usually on weekends. And because I didn't drive, my parents had to drive me out there, and I would usually have somebody there drive me home. So that's... the positives about that is that I got to meet a lot of really cool people. I got to travel around the area. I did get paid, and I also like got free meals with every job that I had there. The next job that I got was with another theater group that worked with visually impaired actors. And the audition process for that was much more traditional. I had to prepare a monologue. I think I prepared a comedy monologue, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if they asked for... They might have asked for 2 different monologues to contrast, so it might have been a comedy and a drama, in which case that's what I did. And they were very impressed with me. They hired me either that day or a few days later. And we were working on sort of another, not really a murder mystery type of thing, but more of a detective, old school detective type of play that was based on an old radio detective series. And I played two roles. I was one of two different people who played two roles in that. So I played a landlady, a really old cranky landlady, and I played the lead character's girlfriend. So that was really fun to go through the process of switching characters kind of midway through, because I had a few scenes as the girlfriend at the beginning, then I had to switch halfway through into the cranky landlady, and then at the end I was the girlfriend again. And playing the cranky landlady was a hoot. We worked in a CNIB auditorium, that's the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. They work with that group and kind of sponsor them, which is really nice. The director for that show was really fun. He's about my age, maybe a year older, and so he was just really funny. And the leader of the group, he's just so great. He's a really awesome, really fun, really sweet guy. Everybody there was amazing, really great to work with. I had a lovely time. The rehearsals were a lot longer for that because unlike the Murder Mystery Dinner Group, where you have one night and one show, I mean, you could be doing, like obviously I had more than one show with them. I had quite a few, but each one was like a different script, and usually I would have quite a bit of a break in between. This was 5 nights in a row, the same show, and more than one performance on some days. And we had weeks of rehearsals, and some of them were probably about 8 hours in length. It was a grind. We had a lot of preparation, but it was a lot of fun. The director filmed each of the performances, and at the end of it, he gave each of us a DVD with one of the performances that he filmed. I guess it was probably the one he deemed the best. During that time, I actually was going through a lot of migraine problems. I was actually in the hospital not long before the performances started. They were not sure I'd be able to make it. And I know the director was saying that he was going to put on a dress and a wig and do my role for me if he had to. I was like, no, I'm going to be able to do it. I'll be fine. He gave me the way to pull through award. Everybody was really worried about me, but, you know, I made it. I did it. It was hard, but I did it. And he even filmed some behind-the-scenes stuff, so all of our warm-ups. And he interviewed each of us on the last day when we were celebrating and like having pizza and stuff. So that's all on there too. I still have the DVD. It's in storage right now because, you know, I'm moving in about 2 months. So I kind of want to get into the negatives now that you've heard the positives, because it's probably been boring as hell right now. But I've been saving all the negative. So let me compare and contrast the two groups. So I had zero negative experience with the second group I was in. If not for my health problems, they would have welcomed me back with open arms. I would have loved to go back and do more shows with them. I did audition for them a second time. Didn't get it, but... and then there was a third time that I was actually approached to do a role specifically because it had been written for me. At that point, I had already fallen ill. I couldn't do it. But the offer was there. And all of the actors were very, very kind. There was no petty behavior or rivalries or anything between the actors. They all loved each other very much. Everybody was very supportive of each other. It was just a very good environment to work in. Not only did we have, you know, sighted actors as well as non-sighted actors, we also had at least one individual on the autism spectrum. We had myself, who I have my physical ailments, and I was very open about sharing that. I was not in a position where I felt like I was comfortable to share that in the murder mystery group. I felt like if I had said anything there, they probably would have told me that I was exaggerating. I think that I would have been massively misconstrued because the behavior in that group was nowhere near the same. Banter behind each other's backs in that group. I remember there was one actor that I met at one of the summer barbecues who was around my age. Very nice guy. Might be worth pointing out that he was also the only non-white actor I ever worked with in that group. And they made fun of him behind his back, talking about whether or not he was gay. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, they would say. Which I thought was just horrible. Like, who cares if he's gay? You don't know if he's gay, and who cares, even if he is? So that was the first thing that really got to me. Like, he's just a really nice guy. He showed up, he did his job, and you're speculating about his sexuality. After I lost a ton of weight, I made a joke about my grandma said something about, well, don't go getting an eating disorder. When I left the room, I could hear them talking about whether or not I did have an eating disorder. So you can imagine, if I'm still within earshot, what are they saying when I'm not there? So if I had shared something about my physical problems, I can just imagine the type of stuff that they would have said when I wasn't around. Like, yeah, she does not have a physical disability. Do you see her? She seems so well all the time. She's just, it's all in her head. Stuff like that, I can just imagine them saying. I was severely undermined at several points by the director. I don't know if it was because of my age. I was the youngest one there. If I had an idea, she was telling me that it was not good, you know, like my ideas weren't good, I shouldn't do this. Even if I didn't have an idea and I just started performing my role a certain way in rehearsals, she would tell me not to, that the person before me did things this way and I should do it that way. But what's the point? I'm an individual actor. I'm not here to play the part the way that person did. That's not acting. I appreciate the fact that that person did a good job. That's nice. If you wanted them, you could have asked them. And this happened almost every time she hired me for a role. And I didn't listen to her. I kept on doing what I wanted to do because I felt that I was doing the right thing. People were enjoying what I was doing. If I put on a voice for a character, people liked it. There was one girl that I worked with there who, she would come up to me after a show and say, I really like what you did there. Next time I'm playing this character, I'm going to add a little bit of that in. That's really validating to me. What's not validating is having the director of the group come up to me and tell me not to do that because somebody else didn't. Again, hire that person. You hired me to do this character the way I want to do it. We were forced to change in front of each other. The men and the women, we were all supposed to change in front of each other, even if there was another room. Like, I was made fun of for wanting to have my privacy. Excuse me for being a little unsure of wanting to dress in front of guys who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s and have shown that they are attracted to me in a really gross way. Which, speaking of that, a lot of the guys in that group were very, made me very uncomfortable. There was one guy who turned out to live in my neighborhood, and he repeatedly kind of hit on me, invited me over to his house to watch a movie. I was 20 at the time, I think, 20 or 21. He wanted me to go over his house and watch a movie. He rented the movie just because he had overheard that I wanted to watch it. He would try to get me alone whenever we were at rehearsals. Which was very, very unsettling, because this was a guy who was probably close to 50 and I'm 20 or 21. There were a few guys who were like this in the group. Like, there was one guy who even had a son, and he was inviting me along to a water park with his son so that I could model my new swimsuit for him. Wow, like, it's... But of course, if you said anything like this, which I didn't, to the group leader, I know she wouldn't have believed me, or if she did believe me, she wouldn't have done anything because she knew them for a lot longer. It was that type of environment. It was very toxic. I mentioned earlier about audience participation. There were a few times where I was asked to get male audience members to come up for a scene. There were a few times when these guys were drunk, and one time in particular when I was supposed to reach around and like attach a cummerbund to this one guy, I can't even remember why, and he reached around me and grabbed my ass. And everybody around me was laughing. So they thought that was funny. I didn't think it was funny. After I hurt my face, after I got the scar in my face, I did a couple of shows like that, actually, with either the stitches. The first time I did it, the stitches were still in, and the second time I did that role, the stitches just came out, which didn't bother me because I was like a graveyard keeper, looking a little worse for wear. Actually was to my benefit for that character to look a little bit sketchy. But one of the guys, the guy who invited me to the water park with his son, said that, oh, it's a shame that such a pretty face is ruined. Your face is your moneymaker. Did you realize that you're just telling me that the only reason I get roles is for my face and not my talent? That's what you're saying. There was a lot of small stuff like that, but like it just builds up and it's just gross. And lastly, there's pedophilia, which is very disturbing. But there's pedophilia. So, if you'll recall, I mentioned auditioning for a director 2 times. I was about 16. No, I would have been 17 and 18 when I auditioned for this director. And one of the things I found out later on is that he has a reputation for acting inappropriately around the very young girls. How inappropriately, I'm not sure, but it was well known that he would often pick very attractive younger girls for his plays, and one of the reasons why he would take photos of people at his auditions was so he could have an excuse to take photos of the younger girls as well. And I remember him doing this. I remember him taking photos of everyone at the auditions. I was always under the impression that it was so that he could remember who had come in, and, you know, that would help him cast the role. Finding that out was very disturbing. And I don't know if he was touching them inappropriately. I don't know any of that, but I guess it was really well known that he was not behaving himself around them. So I feel very lucky that I didn't get a role in his plays, but I feel very badly for the young girls who did. One of the actors I worked with in my very first play with the murder mystery group was MIA for a long time, and I was wondering, like, where is this guy? I haven't worked with him since that first show. One of the other actors he was one of the best guys I worked with there, he said this guy had been arrested for possession of child porn. And apparently, the guy from the first play that I was in, this guy who was arrested, he said that he claimed he was only holding on to it for a friend. And then the last person I know who was involved with this was one of my best friends. I had met my boyfriend through the murder mystery group, and we were only together for a few months because he turned out to be very emotionally manipulative and an overall asshole. And he and 2 of his other friends were working at one of the local colleges in the advanced filmmaking program. After he and I broke up, I stayed friends with the other 2 guys. And one of the other guys, in particular, I was very close friends with for another several years. And I realized at one point I hadn't heard from him in a while. I randomly decided to Google his name and found out that he was part of a huge child porn bust here in the city, and that he had been filming and making available the child porn to the public. So I don't know what it is about this area of the industry. There's a lot of pedophilia going on, and it makes me not only incredibly upset, but it makes me think that, okay, if there's that much going on in this small section of theater and film, what's going on in the big leagues of theater and film, like Hollywood? So yeah, I mean, that's a lot of not so good stuff, right? I felt like it was worth talking about all that because I've never really gone over all of that publicly. Some of my friends probably don't even know all of this. It was an experience. I would still definitely like to go back to it at some point, particularly with the group of actors that I really got to know and love. The other thing that really grinds my gears, it's not so much disturbing, but it really grinds my gears with the murder mystery group. At one point, I ended up getting a job at a bakery in a grocery store, and I had to tell the group leader, you know, I can't do this one play that you hired me for. I have to cancel. And I had given plenty of notice. She like full on cut communication after that. And I even remember her saying to somebody else in the group at one point, if you cancel on me, like, you're fired. That's not true though. It's only for some people who cancel on her. People who have been with her for years. If they cancel, even at the last minute, she lets it slide. She holds favorites. I have a legitimate reason for needing to cancel weeks in advance, and she basically very quietly fired me. I had a new job, but that was reason to fire me. And somebody who quit on her, I think I want to say it was 3 to 5 days before a show. Didn't get fired. But I quit, or not quit, I cancel 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and that's not good. That's not good enough. A group like that should be fun, and a lot of times it was just stressful. And I'm kind of regretting going this warm tone, but what's done is done. That's everything I wanted to say about the theater community and my experience working in it. I may go back to it at some point. I'm not sure yet. I'm not really ready to physically at this point. But yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, I can try and answer them down below. If you enjoyed the video, I post Mondays and Fridays here on this channel in the afternoon Eastern time, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!